Hi, my name's Brady Licht, and welcome to the audio companion for Trying Microlearning in K-12 PD, a multimedia introduction to using microlearning for K-12 professional development. In a short span of time, you'll be able to pilot microlearning as an administrator, instructional coach, or consultant. This resource collection is intended to prepare trainers, coaches, and others to use microlearning as or with K-12 PD. Our target audience is the working professional who, much like the people he or she serves, is limited on time. Within the span of 30 minutes, you should have the information and tools you need to develop your first bit of microlearning. Feel free to return to different components or break up your time with this collection across a few sessions. This resource collection includes a preparatory document answering common questions with microlearning, a parallel audio version of these questions and answers that you're listening to currently, several templates to begin designing microlearning, graphics, and resources needed for each template, as well as an evaluation checklist. After delivering your first bit of microlearning to your participants, you'll be ready to dive further into either of the subsequent collections in the series, Theorizing Microlearning or Troubleshooting Microlearning. After both, the final collection in the series is Teaming Microlearning. In total, these will help you become the microlearning leader in your region. While not required, we encourage you to follow along with the non-audio digital collection as well to fully understand what is being discussed. Question: what is microlearning? Objective: I can define microlearning. Answer: like the term personalized learning, there's no shortage of microlearning definitions. Some definitions are broad, covering everything from flashcards to video libraries, while others focus on narrow sets of best practices for particular forms. If you were to ask someone to haphazard a guess, they would likely say something like short learning. Ask the average learning and development professional, and they would likely add that microlearning is less than 10 minutes long, on one topic, and usually a video. Check in the most popular book on microlearning, and they would define it as, quote, an instructional unit that provides a short engagement in an activity intentionally designed to elicit a specific outcome from the participant, unquote. Each of these definitions is useful in certain contexts. As stated in 2021's Microlearning in the Digital Age, quote, to date, the term microlearning has not been adequately defined. While practitioners may agree that microlearning is short, how short and in what modalities it can best be delivered is up for debate, unquote. These debates revolve around whether microlearning includes or does not include performance support, where it's appropriate, and if it's only digital. Perhaps the most well-known debate for microlearning is just how short does it need to be? 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 20? I'll leave these debates up to researchers and theorists for now. Until consensus arrives, the most practical definition of microlearning may be any, quote, educational experience that is focused, short, and effective, unquote. Focused in that it has a single small objective, short in that it takes no more time than necessary, effective in that it can take any form or use any strategy or technology, or lack thereof, to best meet the participant's needs. Ponder this. Where might it make sense to use one definition, and where might it make sense to use another? How can confusion around the definition of microlearning lead to poor implementation? Question: how is microlearning different from what I already do? Objective: I can identify what makes microlearning unique. Answer: odds are that you probably already do something that could be considered microlearning. However, this is most likely accidental microlearning or perhaps organic microlearning. What characterizes the modern microlearning push is an emphasis on the way it is designed. We can consider this intentional microlearning. Intentionally designed microlearning is first conceptualized and designed as microlearning. Courses and experiences that are chopped up into short chunks after the fact are not nearly as effective as something that originates as microlearning. Badrul Khan states as much in Microlearning in the Digital Age. Quote, despite the growing consensus on the use of microlearning and its benefits for performance development and education, experts agree that microlearning is not achieved by merely cutting up existing content into small pieces, unquote. Intentionally designed microlearning will also have an identified use case and purpose that places it in relation to any other learning. Most often, the use cases are to prepare for a latter learning experience, to practice a skill, or to act as post-instruction. Intentionally designed microlearning also emphasizes participant-based language rather than student-based language. as microlearning can be used for both affective purposes as well as performance support, and can be both formal as well as informal, participant is a more accurate term. Individuals are not always encoding information for the long term, nor are they in a classroom. Sometimes they are, quote, recalling the process to fill out a company mileage report or reviewing the expectations for holding web-based conference calls prior to an online event, unquote. Ponder this. What does the term participant imply? Why do you think it's useful for microlearning to have an identified use case? Question. Why the sudden buzz about microlearning? Objective. I can identify at least one reason why microlearning is becoming more popular. Answer. There are several reasons why microlearning has been trending. Torgerson and Iannone in What Works in Talent Development, Designing Microlearning, identify 3 factors that are pushing it to the forefront: mobile devices, social connectedness, and time scarcity. A common example of microlearning is as informal performance support via YouTube and Google. Audiences have become used to consuming quick bits of information digitally on an as-needed basis. If I need to find out how to fix a door hinge, I just quickly pull up a video on it. Quote, as a result of these habits, workers are now pressuring their employers to provide similar instructional approaches for their workplace training, unquote. Likewise, social media and other digital tools have increased the ease with which people can connect to experts and share ideas. A third factor identified is likely the one that brought you to microlearning: a lack of time. Both in our professional and personal lives, time is a precious commodity. It's not about keeping training short, it's about keeping training short while being efficient. It's about a desire to use our time well. Beyond this, however, one reason for the buzz is simply the term microlearning itself. Microlearning was only coined in the last couple of decades. In many ways, the buzz has simply been about having a common term for a set of practices that have already been taking place. Ponder this. Why else might microlearning be on the rise? Opposite this, where might resistance to microlearning come from? Question. What is the research behind microlearning? Objective. I can articulate a piece of research that supports microlearning. Answer. Microlearning can be segmented as either performance support or as spaced learning. Microlearning that acts as spaced learning encompasses the majority of use case categories: preparatory, practice, pensive, persuasive, and post-instruction. For spaced learning, the argument often draws on Hermann Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve. Quote, Ebbinghaus found that memories decayed over time. However, he found that when he reintroduced content at certain prescribed intervals, he could diminish the forgetting process, unquote. The value of spaced practice is confirmed by John Hattie's visible learning study of 5 meta-analyses on the topic, where he concluded that spaced practice, quote, has the potential to considerably accelerate student achievements. As stated, the claim is that students are better able to commit information to memory when they study that information in spaced or distributed intervals, rather than all at once in a massed interval. Spaced practice involves practice broken up into a number of shorter sessions over a longer period of time. Mass practice consists of fewer, longer training sessions, unquote. While spaced practice is common for K-12 students, current professional development for educators is infamously massed and forgotten. For performance support, the argument is that the external tool, whether it be a video, graphic, text, or other, simply helps alleviate the cognitive load and reduce errors in performance. The effectiveness varies greatly depending on the situation, content, presentation, and learner. That said, a classic informal method of performance support is the mnemonic, which also has the, quote, potential to considerably accelerate student achievement, unquote. Ponder this. How might you assess the effectiveness of your own microlearning? How could you compare it to traditional approaches without microlearning? Question. Where should I use microlearning? Objective. I can identify where microlearning should and should not be used. Answer. Certainly, microlearning should be used for K-12 professional development in combination with other approaches. As observed by Crawford and Semyuk in recognizing design-based research as coursework and experiential support, microlearning as integrated teacher-candidate coursework and field-based understandings, quote, microlearning efforts address the inherent needs of a teacher-educator through short, focused, cognitive microlearning events that are started through a teacher education program's mobile application environment, unquote. That said, Torgerson and Iannone suggest not using microlearning if seat time is mandated by law, the content is complicated and or needs to be covered in depth, it's hard to break the content into discrete chunks, and or the content is entirely new to the learner. Otherwise, there is likely some type of microlearning that could benefit K-12 professional development. Ponder this. What work are you currently doing that could benefit from microlearning? How could you have used microlearning in past work? Side note, in K-12 classrooms? Theo Hug in Microlearning in the Digital Age notes that intentionally designed microlearning as outlined by Kapp and DeFelice or Torgerson and Iannone is likely not appropriate for K-12 learners due to the, quote, panoptic and industrial nature of their specific approaches. Others have noted that it may be appropriate when strategically used to support flipped classrooms or personalized learning efforts. Question: is this resource collection microlearning? Objective: I can identify how microlearning is often context sensitive. Answer: this resource collection may or may not be considered microlearning due to 1. Your definition of microlearning, 2. How you're engaging with this collection, and 3. The context in which it's being presented to you. If you're simply reading or listening to the materials in one sitting or working with an instructor coaching you through the materials, this is probably not microlearning. If you're working through it in piecemeal or returning to sections for support, it may be considered microlearning. Even if something's not intentionally designed as microlearning, there are still microlearning principles that can be useful, such as 1. Keeping content short and to the point, 2. Focusing on or answering or supporting small achievable goals, and 3. Carefully considering how an audience will best absorb information. This resource collection certainly follows those principles. Ponder this. Why might it be inappropriate to use microlearning to teach microlearning? How can you apply microlearning principles in your work even if it's not fully microlearning? Question: what are the types of microlearning? Objective: I can identify the 6 use cases of microlearning and the 4 purposes of microlearning. Answer: a key component of intentionally designed microlearning is how it's placed in relation to other learning. For intentionally designed microlearning to be successful, it needs to have a clearly identified use case and purpose. This helps guide the design and does not need to be identified to participants. Each of these use cases and purposes may be in mediums that best align with them, but no use case or purpose is relegated to a single medium. The 6 use cases as outlined in Microlearning Short and Sweet by Kapp and DeFelice are pensive, have participants reflect on an idea, situation, or learning task; performance, provide just-in-time point-of-need support for a task; persuasive, modifies the behavior or habits of the participant; post-instruction, complements a larger training initiative already taken; practice, reminds participants to practice and coaches them on skill; preparatory, sets up a larger learning event. Meanwhile, each of the use cases can serve one or more of the following purposes identified by Kapp and DeFelice on page 43 of their 2019 book. Supplement, quote, offering different ways to engage the learner, unquote. Reinforce, quote, reinforce training content that is used often and is vital for job performance, unquote. Augment, quote, provide an opportunity to build confidence in performing tasks, unquote. Remediate, quote, remediate poor or incorrect performance and behaviors, unquote. Again, it's key that you understand how the microlearning you design relates to other pieces of training. Ponder this. Other scholars on microlearning divide these cases differently. Are there any use cases you could combine? Are there any other use cases that you can think of? Question: what are the ways microlearning can be delivered? Objective: I can identify at least 2 different ways microlearning can be delivered. Answer: microlearning can be delivered independently or as a part of series or collection and can be presented in a variety of mediums. A single piece of microlearning is often appropriate as a job aid or for quick items such as information on how to use drop-downs in docs. However, most microlearning occurs in a series or collection. While series and collections are both groups of microlearning, each piece of microlearning in both should still be able to stand on its own. Series are best for when you're trying to space learning for either practice, post-instruction, pensive, or persuasive use cases. Collections are best when you're preparing people for a larger learning event or want them to engage on an as-needed basis. Microlearning can occur in the following mediums. For each of these mediums, best practices are identified in subsequent collections. Text-based resource. A broad category covering everything from job aids to executive-level summaries. The cheapest, quickest, and most flexible microlearning medium. Email or whisper course. A subcategory of text-based resource where scheduled emails marked as microlearning provide a short, engaging learning experience. Whisper course is the common name for this medium and originated from management training practices at Google. Schedule send options make these great for spaced series. E-learning. Microlearning that's placed in an LMS, website, app, or digital collection. E-learning can allow you to organize microlearning series non-sequentially and add interactivity such as through scenario-based learning. It also allows for tracking of participation. Video. Short videos that are used to highlight processes, procedures, and emotional responses. A relatively time-consuming medium to create within. Individuals looking to use video should first explore either crowdsourcing or curating content before creating their own. Infographic. Graphics that help tell a story visually, best when using lists, data, how-to guides, flowcharts, timelines, comparisons, and hierarchical structures. Podcast. Short audio segments that are best used for participants who travel frequently or are engaging training outside of work, such as listening to podcasts while doing chores. Ponder this. What medium do you feel most comfortable with? What situations might lead you to use a different medium than that? Question. How do I start designing microlearning? Objective. I can identify a microlearning model or select a microlearning template. Answer. There are several models that one can use to design microlearning. However, microlearning can be designed using more traditional models of instructional design, just on a smaller timescale. ADDIE, SAM, Spiral Model, and others can be used with slight modifications. For specific microlearning models, Torgerson's MILE is a good starting point. She suggests developing microlearning in the following order with the understanding that one may need to return to early stages as needed. Quote, 1. Identify performance objectives. 2. Determine program technology and structure. 3. Create or select resources. 4. Promote. 5. Monitor, modify, and evaluate. Unquote. One element that is unique to this model is the idea of promotion. Unless your microlearning is required for participants, it needs some way of drawing them in. This can be done by making the microlearning gamified, creating it on a need-to-know topic, or marketing it. She suggests making the content easy to find and using posters, promotions, and reminders of optional microlearning. Note, another model that's worth being aware of is the RREDS microlearning model. Although it should not be used for your first attempt with microlearning, it's a recursive model that draws on constructivist theory. In short, it frames microlearning as short events that help build on and adjust prior understanding. More information on it can be found in Microlearning in the Digital Age. In addition to any of the models mentioned above, it is suggested that you document and save your microlearning. This should be a copy of the microlearning along with any design documents. This is beneficial for others as well as for yourself if you wish to reuse or adapt the microlearning. As microlearning is often quick to create and deploy, it's equally easy to forget this important step. If you've never intentionally designed microlearning before or need some help putting into practice, it's encouraged that you use one of the templates in this collection. Finally, consider this custom spiral model of microlearning. The spiral model of instructional design proposed by Senmo and Calc may prove especially fruitful as a middle ground between ADDIE and more agile methods, with each loop around the spiral building to greater clarity. Here it's been simplified into 6 quick questions for developing microlearning. 1. What is your goal? 2. Is microlearning the right fit for it? 3. How should it be designed for the situation? 4. How should you test if it'll work? 5. How should you build or source items for it? And 6. How should you promote and monitor it? Ponder this. What areas do you anticipate struggling with when implementing microlearning for the first time? Where could you look to find answers and troubleshoot issues with your microlearning? Thank you for listening to the audio parallel companion to the Microlearning Q&A document as a part of the Trying Microlearning in K-12 PD resource collection. If you've enjoyed this audio companion, we encourage you to continue on your journey with us by exploring the document's microlearning templates, self-evaluation, bibliography, and the links to the Whisper course banners so that you can use them throughout your early attempts with microlearning. Thank you again for giving microlearning a shot. We hope you sincerely appreciate the resources in this collection and use and share them with your friends. If you have any questions, reach out, but otherwise, we look to see all your great attempts into the world of microlearning. Thanks for listening.